Okay, The Last Colony. This book opens up with John, Jane, and Zoe on the planet that John and Jane retired to at the end of Ghost Brigades. They're doing their thing. John's helping these two backwater brothers argue over a goat. Jane's making sure no one steals candy and everyone follows the basic rules of society. And Zoe's just living her nice little teenage life. She's 13, 14 by the time this book rolls around. One day, Zoe's at home and she looks out and she sees a flying saucer come zipping into the farm, and it lands and a green man comes out. That's the way she describes it in Zoe's tale, but The Last Colony and Zoe's tale are the exact same events told from different angles. The green man steps out of the space shuttle, he talks to Zoe, Zoe's like, oh, I'll go get mom and dad, and she comes back, and John and Jane go into the sorghum field, because that's the only way they get privacy on this planet, and they talk about a new project happening. This project is going to be an official, sanctioned colony where about 10,000 people from 12 colonies, I believe, they're going to go off and form one big colony called Roanoke. John is not happy. He's like, I kind of liked it here, but the idea of adventure and getting out to the stars, it feels good again. Jane is absolutely not having it because this was a peaceful place for her. She finally had something that's not killing people, not fast-paced. She's grown used to it. Also, with having her unmodified body, she got really, really used to being able to look up at the stars and actually see the constellations because she doesn't have a brain pal in her head identifying everything. Her brain can get creative and see things that other humans were able to see, but she was practically a machine with fleshy components around it, and she's just kind of gotten used to this lifestyle. The general, after he convinces them to go, he jokingly says, hey, it's going to get kind of dangerous out there. If you want, I could authorize you to transfer back into your military body if you want. And Jane's like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I like my body as it is. He's sad. He tries to convince her to change her mind, but she's like, no, really, I like my body the way it is. Thank you. They get the colonies together. They get the volunteers together after a rigorous vetting process. They put them all on a ship, and as they're drifting to the warp point, Jane starts to come down with a fever. And we don't really see what happens until things explode, but John just knows, hey, she's never been sick. Something's up here. But he's going to be the leader of the colony, so he's kind of busy. After a long 2 or 3 days of meeting people, he goes back to the room and he sees Jane has been eating and eating and eating and drinking so much water, and she's got a fever and she's tired. She looks up at him and she's got this very stone cold expression on her face. She says, John, I need you to come over here and I need you to hit this table as hard as you can. John's like, what? She's like, no, just come over here, just hit the table. He comes over, he hits the table as hard as he possibly can. Nothing happens. She looks sad. She says, yeah, we're about the same strength, right? And he's like, well, yeah, my body is about as strong as yours. She flicks the table and it cracks immediately. And John is like, what happened? I thought you had a normal body. The other day, something happened with Zoe and she really needed a hug. And I gave her a real tight hug and she started telling me that I was hurting her. And I realized something's not right. The general slipped nanites into my body and they self-replicated and turned me into my former body. John is mad. Jane swears she's going to murder the general, But because that is not advantageous, they agree that Jane's just not going to be in the same room as him. So, the rest of the stuff goes off without a hitch. They hit the warp point, they jump to the new planet where the colony of Roanoke is going to be. And surprise! They actually end up being at a completely different planet, and they find out there is a group of aliens, 420 species altogether, called the Conclave, that wants to destroy Roanoke because it is an illegal settlement. The Conclave has said that unless you're in the Conclave, you cannot make another colony. If you're in the Conclave, when they find a planet, if you want to colonize, you have to agree to share the planet with a handful of other species as well. Humans, being what they are, being as selfish as they are like, forget that, we're sharing with nobody. Well, John and Jane weren't told this. Unfortunately, Hickory and Dickory, the Oban bodyguards for Zoe, they were told this, but they were ordered not to tell anybody. And so when John and Jane find out, they're mad. It gets worse when John and Jane have to tell the council that in order to keep the colony safe and in order for the Conclave to not find them, they have to turn off all of their electronic technology. All of it. Well, that doesn't go over very well, but as soon as John and Jane show the video of the Conclave coming in and literally cooking with lasers settlements off the planet, they're like, fine, we get it. This is okay. They land, they make their non-technology settlement, and they live for about a year with the usual hijinks of, oh, not all the food is okay to eat, we'll just avoid these plants. Oh, there's some native wildlife that might try to get into our settlement. You know, just normal new colony stuff, normal New World stuff. Until one day, the general shows back up and says, hey, we're ready. Everyone can have their technology back. We want the Conclave to find you. And it's, John and Jane are mad because they realize after looking through the video and how it's been edited that they're bait. The Conclave is going to come find them, and General Gao, which is the leader of the Conclave, is going to show up, say, hey, you should join the Conclave, or you should get off this planet. And they're going to try to deal a crippling blow to the Conclave. And John and Jane are just mad. Like, how dare you risk the lives of their people to do this? And then it just gets worse from there because the intentions of the colonial union were never good. I literally can't talk anymore about that book or about Zoe's Tale without spoiling the best part of John Scalzi's writing in the whole series, in my opinion. But the end of that book is wild. You have to read it. It's a masterful piece of writing and character development. It's just, Those two books, Zoe's Tale and The Last Colony. So it's bad enough having somebody slip something in your food to rebuild your body against your will, but it gets worse. When the general shows back up on Roanoke and says you can have all your technology back, the way he finds the colony is he activates the brain pal, the robot of sorts, in Jane's head. And she didn't know it was there. She didn't give permission for it to be there. And she has an absolute meltdown that there was something in her brain that could have been listening, that could have been feeding things to her the whole time without her permission, without her knowing it was there. That's a little triggering. So just be aware of that. Other than that, there were no other traditional triggers. There was an especially beautiful part that is only told in Zoe's Tale, where the Oban have to fight the Khonsu to get something that Zoe really, really needs. And the Khonsu has a heart-to-heart with Zoe and says, you know, you don't care about these people. You really don't. And she realizes, that's right. They've been watching me my whole life through those technology things that my dad started and the colonial union made. And they're about to engage in this fight, and there's a chance that all of them could die because they care about me and they like the idea of me, but they don't love me. And so I need to go and release them from their obligation because that's just not okay for me to ask them to fight and die when I don't personally care about them. It's a one-way relationship. It was a tear-jerk moment where she stands in front of the 100 and says, basically, I can't ask you to die for me because you care more about me than I care about you. I relinquish you from your obligation. Every single one of them like steps forward individually and says, my name is this, my name is that. I love you for who you are, not the ideal. I've grown up with you, I've watched you, I'm invested in you because of who you are, not what you are. And just, okay. It was a beautiful piece of writing. So. The human division and the end of all things were a good way to end this series. The point of view in the human division changes to Wilson and occasionally from the perspective of Ambassador Abumway. This B team, and no, they're really an A team of ambassadors, but somebody labeled them the B team. They go around and they just create peace and they work with species, with the humans, to be friends and to share planets and to do this and that. They also do a little bit of a cleanup after, well, the Earth found out they were being farmed for soldiers and were being kept in the technological dark ages compared to what was being used up in the colonial union. And they get mad about that. So in the human division, there's some cleanup that happens with the main governments of Earth as well. So in the human division, there's a little bit of cleanup from the backlash of that. At the very end of the human division, we find out that the Conclave is having ships disappear at the edge of the border of space with the Colonial Union. Well, the Colonial Union is also having ships disappear. And this team of ambassadors decides, hey, we're going to have a backside channel discussion with the second in command of the Conclave, and we're going to talk this out and figure out what's going wrong. When they get there, both ships get bombed by a ship, and they don't destroy it, but they take it out of commission, and they try to send a signal to the ship to be like, yo, what happened? Why are you bombing us? When they get over there, Wilson, who is a former soldier who worked with John Perry, he was part of the old farts, he walks on the bridge of the ship and is like, there's nobody here. It's completely clean. No one's been here in like forever, but like, how did we get attacked by this ship? All of a sudden, the screen on the bridge turns on. It says, hello, please step to the left. I can't see you. He steps to the left, and the screen starts talking and explaining that the pilot is the ship. After a little bit of trust building, a little bit of talking, the pilot, who is the ship, says, hey, I need you to open the cabinet to your right very gently. Wilson is like, okay, I trust you enough for that. He walks over, he opens the cabinet, and there is a brain in a jar attached to the electrical components of the ship. And that brain is the ship. That brain is piloting the ship. And Wilson is like, oh, this is bad. They try to unwire the brain to take him home so they can clone this poor soul a new body. But there's a bomb attached to it, and they eventually end up just mercy killing the pilot with his consent. Unlike the previous book, they learned the whole consent thing. They're good in this one. That's the end of the human division. At the beginning of The End of All Things by John Scalzi, we see this man named Rafe. He got blackmailed by another pilot, and he just is not able to get a single piloting job until he runs into a trade ship that needs a third pilot, and they are desperate. They will take literally anybody. So he interviews, gets the job, no questions asked. They take off to go deliver some fruit, and on the way, they get attacked by pirates, or they think it's pirates. They get attacked, Rafe gets knocked out, and when he wakes up, he's a brain in a jar and everyone else is dead. Someone identified him as a pilot, and so they kept him, and they did to him what they did to that other guy at the end of the human division. He's mad because the guy who pointed him out was a fellow human and a high-ranking diplomat in the colonial union. So, Rafe decides he's going to play along, and then in the after hours, after training of how to learn to use his ship again, he exploits the loopholes, he exploits the unpatched bugs in the system to get information, find out where that high-ranking diplomat is, and by the time his training is over, he says, "Hey, could I please have a goodbye chat with that high-ranking diplomat?" Now, because Rafe has been doing so good with the training, and he has been so compliant, and it's frankly pretty easy to let him have a goodbye chat with the guy who turned on him. Their Control, which is the name of the guy who's been controlling and teaching him, is like, "Yeah, you get 10 minutes. He jumps onto the ship. They begin to have their goodbye chat. Rafe sucks all the air out of the whole ship except for the command deck, which is where Rafe's brain and the senator are. He takes off running, and he makes it all the way back to the colonial union, spills the beans on Equilibrium, hands over the traitorous senator who confirms everything, and they realize there's a plan to nuke the Earth and make it look like the Conclave did it. And then the humans will turn on the Conclave and it'll wipe everybody out except the Conclave, which will be really, really weakened. And then Equilibrium will achieve their goal of having it back to the way it was, where every species is fighting every species and everyone is going out for their own self-interest, because that's what Equilibrium wants. They don't want to be controlled by the Conclave and their whole colonization thing. And they certainly don't want to be with the humans who are selfish. So, when Rafe gets back, everything falls apart and everything explodes. But through a lot of democracy and a lot of frankly crazy stuff, the day is saved. What I liked about this book is all the plot holes they wrap up, but it leaves so much room for fan fiction writers. Like, you could take any character and continue the story on your own. Like, there's a lot out there for you. The End of All Things and the Human Division are a little bit violent. The idea of brains being in jars forever is very scary. But it's not nearly as bad as some of the other stuff that happens in the book. Like, it's a war book. Keep that in mind when you read this book. Overall, I did enjoy this series. Relative to Mr. Scalzi's other series with the Emperos, I really like this book because I think there's maybe like 4 F words in the whole series. And I'm not very big on profanity. The last Emperor series, which I've also read, there's like 75 F words in each book. And that's just not for me. But if you're okay with profanity, that series is also very good. Thank you guys for watching today. I know it was long. I appreciate you sticking through to the end. Tune in next time for another book. Bye!